At a first glance, Kingsgrave wasn't a game that really stood out to me, if I'm being honest, but after playing the demo for about 5 minutes earlier this year, I was sold. It appears to be your typical medieval fighty survival adventure game, but when it comes down to it, Kingsgrave is really about adventure and discovery. Seeing a new area off in the distance that you can't reach just yet, or finding a puzzle that you have no idea how to solve. The game comes out in just a few days on April 17th for $10 US, which is a very fair price, and this review copy was provided to me by Vicarious PR. This one does share a lot in common with one of my favorite genres, the Metroidvania, but it feels a lot more similar to a classic Zelda game than your typical side-scrolling platformer. If you crave that aha moment of finally figuring out where you're supposed to go next and what item you need to get there, you're gonna like Kingsgrave. There were many moments where I thought, this is it. I am officially stuck, must have broken the game somehow because I've tried absolutely everything, only to realize my path forward was staring me in the face the whole time. Nothing about the game is particularly challenging. The combat can be tedious, I'll touch on that later, but mostly you just have to use your common sense, which can be surprisingly difficult. You play as a king who has somehow slept through an entire world-altering plague. Your kingdom in ruins, you set out to reunite your people and build back your settlement. In general, this is how the gameplay loop goes. Find a new area, fight off the enemies nearby to unlock a torch, which you can use to heal and fast travel. Then there may be a few people to rescue or a structure to build, which can give you access to new resources and tools. Once the map opens up a bit, things really do feel open-ended. You're not given much direction on where to go next, which means you may spend a good deal of your time fumbling around, as I did. But feeling lost makes the discoveries you stumble across so much more satisfying. Every tiny bit of progress feels meaningful, and clearing the fog off the map is a good way to visualize this progress. And more about the map. I'd like to see an option to zoom out because you do end up using fast travel quite a bit, and having to pan across the whole thing gets a little bit tedious. It also does get cluttered, and it's easy to forget where you were heading to pick up more of a certain resource, but it is what it is. And all the UI isn't necessarily the flashiest, but it gets the job done. The menu doesn't have very many settings. Hopefully this will be updated upon release. There was a note in the review guide I was sent that said more objects on the map to be added at launch to improve the appearance and completeness of locations. I don't know what else they could add, but they're at least working on some sort of fix. Okay, so I talked about the exploration in Kingsgrave and how I feel like it's the game's strong suit. The other major portion of the experience is combat, which is basically go in close for a few attacks, dash away, maybe shoot off a few arrows, and repeat. You'll unlock a few different weapon types, some which are more useful on specific enemies, and they can all be upgraded so you can choose where you want to spend your resources there. Generally, you don't deal very much damage, so some combat sections can feel a bit drawn out, but you'll get the hang of it. And here's a hint that may help you if you get stuck. Pay attention to the weapon upgrade trees, specifically for your bow. You can give it different elemental powers and switch them out whenever you need to. Keep that in mind. Now, you can't heal in the game using consumables or anything. The only way to get your health back is by progressing to the next day at one of these save points, which will respawn enemies in specific dangerous areas in the world. This is actually a good thing, even though it sounds kind of annoying, because they drop life essence, which can be used to craft resources like wood and stone. And although there are quite a few resource types to collect, it's not really a crafting game in a traditional sense. More of a trading in one resource for another kind of thing to unlock the next upgrade. You also don't have to worry about saving or losing much progress. If you die, you'll always respawn pretty close to where you were and just might have to fight off a few enemies again to get back into it. I did play most of the game with a keyboard and mouse. I tried it out on Steam Deck and it did work great, but combat was much easier for me using a mouse. Otherwise, you have to use both joysticks to walk and aim while also trying to dodge out of the way, and it was just too many buttons to keep track of. It took me about 8 hours to finish, which is the perfect length. I didn't run into any bugs or performance issues. Maybe one other thing I'd like to see tweaked aside from the UI stuff I mentioned is how dark the game is. There's not much contrast, and it's much more dull than pretty much every other pixel game I've ever seen. That's one of the reasons it didn't catch my eye in the first place, but I am very glad that I gave the demo a chance. Overall, I'd say that Kingsgrave was a very enjoyable game that rewards you for paying close attention to your tools and the environment. Every bit of progress you make is so satisfying, and the gloomy atmosphere does make it feel like you're restoring a rotten world bit by bit. Combat can be a little tedious, but once you learn what works and unlock some upgrades, it's not so bad. It's short and sweet, doesn't overstay its welcome, but the map is large enough that each area has its own feel and mysteries to uncover. Thank you all for watching, and keep your eye out for more reviews on all different types of indie games over the next few months.